name is Don Snyder. I'm the Director of Trade Development for the Port of Long Beach. On behalf of everyone who's worked so hard to put this year's event together, welcome to the Pulse of the Ports. It's our 9th annual forecast event where we try to get a forward glimpse at the supply chain and the cargo flow through the peak season. To get things started, please join me in welcoming Susan E. Anderson-Weiss, President of the Port of Long Beach Board of Harbor Commissioners. Susan.
Thank you, Don, and good morning, everyone. It's great to see you here again, and welcome to everyone that's watching online and around the world. I think this is the biggest turnout we've ever had, and we've got lots going on at the Port of Long Beach, and this is just another example of it. I want you to know we've had 3 groundbreakings in less than a year, so that's pretty fantastic. I want to introduce my fellow commissioners. We are here today in perfect attendance. Vice President Thomas Fields, Commissioner Nick Ceramic, Commissioner Doug Drummond, and Commissioner Rich Dines. And we're also fortunate to have a couple of former commissioners with us, Commissioner Mike Walters, and a commissioner who sits on another commission, Commissioner Mario Cordero from the Federal Maritime Commission. So, each of us looks forward to this annual forecast event, and this year we're fortunate to have another remarkable lineup of experts from every walk of our industry. I want to thank them for their willingness to talk about their particular segment of the supply chain. It's so important that we have each element of the supply chain represented. As you all know, forecasting is not an exact science, but the views that will be presented here today will help us as leaders and learn from these leaders and help us look at the big picture and plan more for the months ahead. Now join me in welcoming to the podium our moderator for the day, Chris Lytle, Executive Director of the Port of Long Beach. Chris?
Great, thank you, Susan. Well, I can't believe another year has gone by. You know, it was just a few years ago that I can recall as a member sitting in the audience. The question was, is there a pulse in the port? And I think we're going to hear today some pretty positive indicators that we've turned the corner and we're continuing to improve. So it's a great lineup. It's probably the best group of speakers that we've had. So we're really looking forward to getting into it. Into all the presentations. Before we get started, just a couple things. Recognize some VIPs in the audience. From representatives of the various elected offices, and if you would just hold your applause till the end, representatives from the offices of Senator Boxer, Senator Feinstein, Congresswoman Janice Hahn, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, State Senator Lou Correa, State Senator Ricardo Lara, State Senator Rod Wright, State Assembly Member Isidore Hall, State Assembly Member Anthony Rendon, Los Angeles County Supervisor Don Kanabe, Council Member Gary DeLong, Council Member Patrick O'Donnell, and Council Member Al Austin. So welcome all of you too. I think many of you have been with us since the first of the Pulse of the Ports in 2005, and it's been kind of a very interesting evolution as this event has continued to grow. In fact, I thought maybe this morning we might see, as we were taking the RSVPs, that it actually, with more and more people choosing to go online, that we might have the numbers dip a little bit. But on the contrary, I think, as President Weiss said, this has been the biggest crowd that we've had so far. And the beauty of this event is that it gives each of us really the opportunity to step back and take a look at this supply chain from several different angles. And I think that's really what gives this type of setting so much power. And aside from the fact that it's also very compact, you get a lot of information here, so those of you that are taking notes, get ready, because we're getting ready to start. We'll also most likely hear things that we hadn't considered in our planning, things that provide new perspectives and new insights. So I think that's very good. Just for a couple of housekeeping items, please hold your questions until all the speakers have finished, and then we'll have microphones set up in the aisles on both sides here so that you can ask your questions and be heard. For those of you watching the webcast online who want to participate, you can email your questions to pulse@polb.com. Your questions can be general, or they can be directed to any one of our speakers, and they'll be answered at the end of the program along with questions from those attending in person. So, let's begin. The goal for each of us is to be better prepared to do business when we leave here today. And I don't know anyone in our industry who can set the stage for our journey through the supply chain better than our first speaker, Walter Kimses. He will provide the big picture look at the economy. He's no stranger to any of us in the industry. As chief economist for Moffitt & Nichol, he directs and oversees the firm's work related to market studies, financial analyses, global trade, and economic trend forecasts as they pertain to investment in transportation, infrastructure, and particularly maritime facilities. He also is an advisor to executives at various port authorities and major transportation and manufacturing companies. Before joining Moffitt & Nichol, he was head of global strategy at USB and head of European strategy at JP Morgan in London. His research and analysis has been widely presented and published. Please welcome back to Pulse of the Ports, Dr. Walter Kimses.
Morning, everybody. And Chris, thank you for that very nice introduction. As always, it's a true honor to be asked to speak at a major industry event at one of the world's most important ports. Time is short, so we'll jump right into the topics for today. I broke the presentation into 3 key points. The first is the macroeconomic outlook. The second has to do with the peak season forecast. And then we need to take a look at some of the trends that are impacting the forecast. And some of them, to some people, might seem like news, but we are actually seeing these trends impacting the data. Now, the first bullet is more of a hopeful bullet than a negative or positive message. We are seeing a dynamic feedback, a reinforcement of consumer spending driving employment higher, because as people buy more cars and homes and other retail goods, the companies need to hire more people to produce these goods, and this has been in effect now for about a year and a half. Not very fast growth, and to be honest, that's not such a bad thing. Because the problem is, part of the way that we got here was the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates to very low levels, and that's just on the short end of the curve. And on the far end of the curve, the Federal Reserve has bought a lot of bonds, government bonds, to push the prices up and interest rates down. Now that's a nice way to help the economy out, because by making things that you pay for over a long period of time cheaper, we can stimulate demand and get things to start moving forward again. The problem is the Fed, because of the financial system collapsed back in 2008, the Fed has had to buy a large number of bonds, and so much that if all of the money the Fed has pumped into the economy starts getting spent at once, prices will rise very quickly, and the Fed will have to reverse course quite dramatically. And if it does so, then we have another slowdown. I do think we are going to get a slowdown by 2015. I don't think it's going to be, I used the word recession there, but it's not the same thing as what just happened to us. That was more of a depression. 4 to 5 years to recover, to barely recover, is more than just a recession. So what we're talking about here is a mild contraction in GDP, and this would happen in an environment where Europe was doing better, Asia was recovering, so the global backdrop is nothing like it was in the last few years. So having said all of that, the problem is any forecast, like last year, is still policy dependent. A very good example, besides the Federal Reserve reacting to potential inflation, is the federal government's ongoing debate about how high the deficit should be, what the debt levels should be, and so forth. And nobody really knows what will finally get resolved there. So any forecast is still a little bit of a bet on the political outcomes in Washington. So that takes care of the first part. But if you look at the economy fundamentally from the inside, the feedback that we're seeing between spending and employment growth, we are looking at a better peak season forecast. The numbers are a little wider than usual because we're still trying to figure out what the policymakers are going to decide. But we are looking at about a 5% growth in import volumes, third quarter peak season this year compared to last year. And I'll come back to you with a chart to make it clear. The third part is that what has been happening in the world in the last 10 to 15 years is really showing up in many different ways in our economy, and that is the accommodation of a large number of people from the emerging markets joining the world's middle classes. And as these people buy cars and clothing and homes and put electrical systems in the countries, this growth in demand has to be accommodated by people who live in the developed economies. And so oil prices have risen, and they're getting to the point where we need to get some parts of the economy to use something other than oil to fuel itself, because otherwise we're going to have terribly high oil prices. And we also need to accommodate other raw materials demands that are coming out of the emerging markets. The way we see this affecting us in the port industry is equipment repositioning patterns and the need to be on your toes to support both exports as well as imports. And that's something that the Port of Long Beach has been very supportive of and has executed quite well. So we'll go into these now in a little bit of detail. The first part is consumer spending. And I broke this into the main components. And the chart looks a little ugly, but that's the way the data is. The blue line at the top, that's retail sales. That's the dollar value of it. If you discount it for inflation, we'll find that retail sales are actually not back yet to what they used to be in 2008, but getting pretty close. Car sales had dropped from a 16 million pace to 8 million in 2009. They're up to 15 million, so we're getting back to where we used to be. And then finally, home sales, which is what affects an awful lot of us. They bottomed in 2011, and since then we are working our way back up. And as people gain jobs, the pent-up demand to replace clothing and automobiles to repair and improve homes is rising, and that drives a lot of boxes through the United States ports. But the reason we're seeing the consumer spending rise is partly because of the rise in employment. I started this chart in January of 2010. That's 6 months after the GDP estimates for the U.S. started to expand again. So that's the normal 6-month lag. And since then, we've added over 6 million jobs in the private sector. The total number is less than 6 million because the government has fired over 500,000 people in the last 2 years and a couple of months. So we have this shift going on of people out of the public sector and into the private sector, and that does slow down the recovery a bit. But this is why we're seeing higher consumer spending. People are getting jobs. And where they're getting jobs isn't just to meet consumer spending, but it's also because our exports are rising. The biggest growth factor in the world right now that companies can be connected to is the rising emerging market middle class. And exports that serve that middle class are more likely to grow than pretty much anything else. And the companies that are involved in those industries, in energy, agriculture, capital goods, are hiring more people and expanding their factories. So there is a recovery going on. Of course, a lot of this was helped by the Fed. As I mentioned earlier, the Fed has taken some unusual actions. This is the Federal Reserve's targeted interest rate, the overnight interest rate, going back to 1950, I believe. And they set the rate at 0. The Fed has never done that before. And that just tells you how absolutely bad the conditions were in the financial sector of the U.S. economy. It blew up. We were left without a banking system, and the Fed had to step in and put it back in place. Recessions that follow financial crisis usually take 4 to 7 years to get back to recovery, and that's why it's been very difficult to be positive. Nonetheless, the banks are healthier. Things are beginning to come back into place. Consumer finance is becoming more available. So all of the wheels are moving in the right direction. I have a scorecard for each phase of the business cycle. This is my scorecard for the recovery phase, or the expansion phase. There are 9 factors on it. You can read the slides later. I'm not going to go into all the details because Chris will push me right off the stage here. So the bottom line is there are 9 factors. 7 of them are positive, 1 is negative, and 1 is neutral. So the score, if you put +1 for positive, -1 for negative, is +6. And that scorecard tells me that U.S. GDP should be growing higher than 3%. The number I gave the Federal Reserve in the survey was 2.8. I'm still a little reticent about a few things, but nonetheless, the bottom line is that the scorecard tells us that all of the factors are moving in the right direction. So what does this mean for the port industry? Well, this is quarterly imported container volumes for the United States' 15 largest ports. These ports account for 98% of the imported container volumes in the U.S. And last year, we said we'd have a peak season, 3 to 5%. The number came in at the 3%, so I guess I was allowed to come back this year. This year, the numbers tell me 5%, but the models are all over the place because of the policymakers' actions still being so important to the economy. And consequently, we have quite a range there from -6 to +12%. I'm not very happy about it, but that's about as tight as you can make it. Nonetheless, I do think the 5% number is, I would say, the most likely outcome. And I feel relatively confident that that's what we'll see when we get to the end of the third quarter this year. So beyond that, we take a look at all of the port volumes by type. And so here you have total and only the loaded ones, the imports in red, the exports in green, and in blue, the empty boxes. It's monthly data. And last year, the exports were disappointing. They came in at -0.4%. I attribute that primarily to the drought in the U.S., and that was pretty much national. It affected our corn exports. We ended up importing corn for the first time in a long time. The first soy season didn't go well, but the second one did. And when we look at Europe and Asia, since those economies were slowing, the United Kingdom is in a triple-dip recession. It's what happens when you go over the fiscal cliff. Basically, our exports couldn't really expand, and so they contracted by a little bit. It's still a very good result considering the global economic backdrop. I think this year we're going to see exports grow a lot faster, but I do think the imports will do better because the United States economy has been leading global growth for the last 18 to 24 months. I know it's popular to talk about big growth numbers in India and China, but those numbers are affected by all the infrastructure investing that's happening there. The bottom line is that when you look at world economic growth, the United States, for the first time since 1999, has resumed leadership of global GDP growth. And that's important. It gives confidence to the world cycle, to the world policymakers, and that's the direction I think we'll go in. And as Asia improves, and because they're very export dependent, they will be able to buy more U.S. goods, and so we think the exports rise this year. Moving on a little bit, beyond 2013, and as we look down a few years, we have this horrible chart to think about. This is the number of people turning 65 each year from the year 1900 out to the census forecast for 2050. I call it a tsunami. It looks like a picture of one. And You know, the problem, is that the proportion of people in the U.S. who are over the age of 65 is going to rise to close to 20% as time goes by. And the real issue here is that these people really live a long time. And that does slow down. And what can we say? And when we look at what can this do for container volume imports, quite frankly, maybe we're looking at wheelchair imports, eyeglasses, things of that nature. So I don't think the imports are going to grow very quickly. And where we're going to get stuff from is changing. China, which has been so dependent on exports, is making great progress in becoming more of a domestic demand-driven economy. And as it becomes more of a domestic demand-driven economy, it doesn't become the main source. Excuse me. It doesn't become the main source of, it becomes less of our main source of imports, and that shifts to other places like South Asia and Mexico. So when you look at your forecast, do be careful where you think the volumes are coming from. And the last but really important point is that oil prices have risen a lot. And this chart shows oil prices relative to natural gas and diesel prices relative to natural gas. The historical long-term averages are shown by those straight lines. And at current oil and natural gas prices, there is a huge difference between where we are versus the long-term average. And this is compelling a large amount of our sector to consider shifting fuels from oil, bunker diesel, over to natural gas. I do expect this to happen, and this is good for the U.S. The U.S. could even be an exporter of natural gas, and this drives the GDP forecasts upward. So although we have an aging population on the demand side, at least on the supply side, we have the potential to keep increasing productivity. So not everything is that bad. And just to close up, just to summarize very quickly, fortunately I got my bullets messed up. So we expect the economy to do better this year than last year, the peak season to come in around 5%, and we are watching all of these other trends that are emerging as a result of the biggest growth factor in the world economy, which is the rising emerging middle class in the emerging markets. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Walter. Now we'd like to hear a little bit about inbound cargo movement. It's our great pleasure to hand this task to Jonathan Gold and welcome him to the panel. A real heavy hitter in the industry, he serves as Vice President of Supply Chain and Customs Policy for the National Retail Federation. He joined NRF in October 2007 and is responsible for representing the organization before Congress and the administration on supply chain and customs issues impacting the retail industry. Please welcome Jonathan Gold.
Chris, thank you very much for that kind introduction. Not sure how to take heavy hitter, but I'll go with it. But again, thank you. It's a pleasure to be back out here in Long Beach. I always enjoy coming out here for the events, and I'm glad I was invited back to participate in the Pulse of the Ports event. I think last time I was out here was a very different situation with the economy back in 2010, and we're glad to see that the port and the economy has recovered since then. So with that, let me go ahead and get started. There we go. So, of course, the obligatory commercial for who is NRF. We are the world's largest retail trade association. Our members operate more than 3.5 million establishments in the U.S. We support 1 in 4 U.S. jobs. That's 42 million working Americans. And we contribute $2.5 trillion to the GDP. NRF encourages policymakers to support a jobs, innovation, and consumer value agenda aimed at boosting economic growth and job creation. Last year, we launched our NRF Retail Means Jobs campaign, emphasizing the importance of retail to the U.S. economy. For too long, people think that retail just means the store clerk, the cashier, or something else, kind of a low-level job. But that's not the case. Retail, as you can see, 42 million working Americans in the retail industry and related jobs. So obviously, supply chain is a big part of that to help support the retail industry. This year, we're launching our This Is Retail campaign, which will focus on careers, communities, and innovation, which are all key for the retail industry. Now, it's always tough doing economics after an economist goes, so here's my shot. Last year, 2012, we saw continued growth in the U.S. economy, which was a positive. We saw steady economic growth. Our holiday sales were positive again. The NRF had projected a 4.1% increase in holiday sales. In actuality, they came in at 3%. That's $579.8 billion in holiday merchandise sales last year. For import growth in 2012, we saw 15.8 million TEUs. That was up as close to 3%. In 2013, we're estimating about 3.2% increase in imports. For the East Coast, we're predicting 2.6% growth, and for the West Coast, 3.6% growth, and for LA Long Beach, 3.4%. So looking at our 2013 forecast on behalf of NRF, we're looking at a 3.4% forecast for this year, a little bit lower than what we saw in 2012. But the big thing here is that online sales are continuing to grow at between 9 to 12% for this year, which is pretty significant. February retail sales were up 0.7% from January this year, and up 0.5% from February of last year. So retail sales continue to climb, and this was an unexpected positive going into this year. Now looking at retail imports, February estimate is at about 6.8%. Our March estimate is to be up again another 2.3%. And for the first half, we're expecting continued growth at about 4.3%. And just because you always have to show a graph, here's from our NRF Global Port Tracker, which shows East Coast versus West Coast with our forecast and what we've seen over the past couple of years. Now, as Walter noted, there are a lot of challenges that still face the U.S. economy. While we continue to see growth, there are still some things that could always knock us off that growth path. First and foremost, the continuing challenge with the fiscal cliff, our debt limit, and sequestration. And I'll get into sequestration in just a little bit. But consumer confidence continues to remain high right now, but that could change at any moment. Unemployment, we see unemployment continuing to drop, and hopefully that trend will continue. But again, that's something that we have to pay very close attention to see what the impact that is going to be on the U.S. economy. And then finally, because I am from Washington, D.C., did have to raise the issue of legislative and continued regulatory uncertainty. We see continuing battles in Congress, and I wish I could predict what Congress is going to do this year, but my magic ball just is not working these days. We hope Congress will actually be able to come together and get some work done. We saw some positives last week with the Senate vote on the budget. They actually passed a continuing resolution, so Congress will continue to be funded throughout the rest of the fiscal year. We just hope they'll actually be able to come together and work on some issues that are really going to impact the economy. We know there are some other big issues that they're going to be tackling, whether it's immigration, guns, but we know the budget is a real critical issue that's going to have a real-world impact on the U.S. economy and all of us sitting here in this room today and others. So let me jump into some of the key supply chain issues, both here at the Port of Long Beach and then also broader for things that we're paying attention to. Obviously, labor negotiations are a critical issue. It's been a very tumultuous year when we look at labor negotiations with what we saw on the East Coast and Gulf Coast with the negotiations between the ILA and USMX, the constant threat of potential disruptions with contracts coming up for expiration and then last-minute deals for extensions was very tough on the shipping community, both importers and exporters. We had a lot of members who were continuously looking at doing contingency planning at very expensive, trying to figure out and make sure they can get their cargo to the store shelves or out of the country for exports. It was a very challenging year. Obviously there were some issues here with the OCU and the 8-day strike that occurred and finally got resolution on that contract. We know that with the upcoming contract next year between ILWU and the PMA, I just want to make a plea on behalf of the NRF members and other shippers. We know there are going to be some tough issues that need to be discussed in the contract. We're fully aware of that, fully accept that. We just encourage both parties to please remain at the table and continue to work and get a contract done. Having disruptions that impact the economy are just not worth it. We think staying at the table, continuing to talk, continuing to get a job done is what is going to be best for everybody within the supply chain. Labor, management, and all of the BCOs who rely on the ports of LA and Long Beach. We all know what happened in 2002. We can't afford to see that again. 2008 was a great example where you guys were able to get a contract done, stay at the table, no issues. We just encourage both parties to please, 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 if I can say it again, please, stay at the table and get a deal done. again, we know there are tough issues that need to be discussed. They're only going to get resolved if you guys stay at the table and continue to talk. So I'll move on from that. Sequestration. Unfortunately, we're in a situation now where we've kind of gone over the cliff, and all the agencies are forced to do budget cuts to comply with sequestration. Obviously, the biggest impact here is the impact on Customs and Border Protection, as well as some of the other agencies. We hope that with the continuing resolution that was signed into law, that will provide Customs and Border Protection some flexibilities to be able to continue to process cargo in a timely fashion. We know the initial instinct was to cut some of the overtime, which impacted RPMs and NII inspections and other things. We hope now that the CR will be able to allow them to do some flexibilities. I want to applaud CBP here locally with the work they've been doing with the trade community, trying to make sure that the impact has been minimal for what we've seen working here at the ports. We've been working closely with CBP at the headquarters level, but all the decisions are being made local. So I applaud CBP here in the region for working closely with all of the trade groups, trying to make sure that we're seeing minimal impact on cargo coming in and out of the port. A couple of operational issues I want to talk about. First and foremost, again, I want to congratulate the Port of Long Beach on the terrific job you've done on the Clean Trucks program. I think that is a shining success of what can be done when you bring all the parties and stakeholders together to put a program in place that we think has had great benefits at the end of the day. Now other ports around the country are looking at LA Long Beach, specifically Long Beach, as a model of how to put these kinds of programs into place and the success that you've seen with that. Some of the other key issues that hopefully we can see as similar type of success and participation, turn times, chassis management, infrastructure, and the one I did leave off of there is Pure Pass. These are all critical issues that I know are impacting my members, that they're paying very close attention to as far as how they're being handled here at the Port of Long Beach. It's great that we put some of these working groups together to work on some of these issues. I think all the stakeholders need to be at the table when working through these issues. I was talking with President Wise last night, and we're having a conversation about that. All the parties include not only just management, the terminal operators, the truckers, labor, and the BCOs. When I talk about the beneficial cargo owners, it's great to have some of the largest BCOs participating in those groups. It's great to get that feedback, but I think you can't forget the small and medium-sized guys who are really going to be impacted by some of these projects that are going on. So we're going to encourage you to make sure you're reaching out to the small and medium-sized guys, both importers and exporters, who are really going to be impacted as we go forwards here. The other thing also I left off of here is as we're looking at the future and how the ports are going to continue to progress and move forwards, getting ready for the larger vessels to be able to come into port. It's great to do the work on the shore side, being able to handle the containers, but you've got to look at all the other operational issues as far as how are we getting those containers out of the gate as well and moving through the supply chain. So hopefully work will start here to work at looking in the future, how are we going to be able to handle some of those issues? We know you've already got issues now with handling the loads you've got coming in, but as you have these 15,000, 16,000 TEU vessels coming in, how are you going to be able to handle those loads moving through the gate? So something else to pay attention to. Finally, looking at some of the supply chain issues on a broader level that are impacting not just here locally, but across the country. First and foremost, drivers' hours of service. This is caught up in litigation once again. We hope the American Trucking Association is successful in their lawsuit. We supported and filed an amicus brief in support of the lawsuit. The changes that FMCSA has proposed, which go into effect on July 1, specifically on their 34-hour restart, where you now have to have 2 consecutive nights off from 1 to 5 a.m., really is going to impact those who do overnight driving. It's going to be significant, could have some significant impacts here. We really hope that again, ATA is able to prevail in their case. We were hoping that FMCSA would delay implementation until we got through the litigation. Unfortunately, they have decided not to. So if you are not currently preparing for the new regs under the new hours of service, I would encourage you to make sure you are getting ready for that. The Water Resources Development Act, another big issue, is going to have impacts here at the port, specifically the harbor maintenance tax reform. We fully support the reform language that's inserted in the bill now as far as spending down the monies for HMT and looking at other uses for HMT as well. We know that that's a big problem for ports who are naturally deep and don't need the dredging that's required under HMT. But I think we need to take a look at how HMT is being spent and make sure that all ports can make use of it if there are projects that need to be done. The one thing I do want to point out, though, is that there are some who say HMT puts them at a competitive disadvantage. We do not agree with that at all. We think HMT is one of a multiple of reasons as to why importers pick the ports that they go through. Service and reliability are probably the two biggest factors that go into that. So, we think that's more of an important issue than looking at HMT and the impact that has. But again, support the reform that's currently going through Congress. Highway bill reauthorization, even though we just went through a 6-year battle of getting a new highway bill that is now for 2 years, we're back at it again looking at the highway bill reauthorization and the impact it's going to have on the freight community. We were glad to see that the last bill that went through Congress actually recognized freight and put an emphasis on freight movement. You've got the Department of Transportation, who's putting together a National Freight Advisory Committee to look at the importance of freight and what it means for the U.S. economy. We hope the next bill that hopefully will pass next year will further address the issue, but also really get into the issue of how do we continue to pay for the highway bill. We all know the gas taxes are dwindling, but how do we address the issue and make sure that we continue to fund our roads and other projects? Customs reauthorization, another bill we're paying close attention to, putting the focus back in customs on trade facilitation, not as much as on security. We're hopeful Congress will be able to pass a bill this year. We now have bills introduced in both the House and the Senate, and hopefully they'll be able to come together and get a customs reauthorization bill through. We think it's another critical issue. And then finally, free trade negotiations. The two big ones that are of most of interest to NRF members are the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations, which are currently ongoing. Vietnam is one of the biggest countries that we're looking at as being a beneficiary. Japan is now looking to get into the agreement as well. The administration's goal is to have the negotiations wrap up by the end of the year. That's a very ambitious goal, but we'll see. Hopefully they will put the time and effort in and get the deal wrapped up. And then obviously we just announced the EU-US free trade agreement negotiations, which will hopefully start at some point this summer. Another good round of free trade negotiations, again, will impact trade. So with that, I came in under my 12 minutes, so let me turn it back to Chris.
No, he wasn't kidding. I was watching it count down here. It was 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and he said thank you, and he was off. So good job, Jonathan. Thanks. Now we're going to talk about an area that's of growing importance to us, and that's the exports. At a time when the U.S. is working to increase overall exports, and California is expanding exports of California agricultural products, who better to address the subject than our next speaker? Erica Montoya is the Program Director of the Specialty Crop Trade Council, or SCTC, headquartered in Sacramento. In addition to providing managerial oversight for business operations and development, she directs the organization's interests and activities involving government and trade officials in foreign markets. She advocates on behalf of SCTC members with industry-related groups, and she manages and negotiates ocean freight contracts on behalf of 145 domestic and international members who export dried fruit and tree nuts from the West Coast and Pacific Northwest. Please welcome Erica Montoya.
Good morning, and thank you, Chris, for that introduction. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Port of Long Beach for asking the Specialty Crop Trade Council to speak on behalf of its exporters. Now, before I get into my presentation, I just wanted to give a little background on SCTC, who we are and what we do. Now, SCTC was founded in 1925 under the Webb-Pomerane Act. And the unique thing about the Webb-Pomerane Act is it does allow our members to discuss export pricing in a closed forum as long as we're present. And SCTC was also built to support the business needs of California's dried fruit and tree nut exporters. And as Chris touched on, we currently have 145 domestic and international members. Majority of these members are small to medium-sized handlers and packers, and then of course brokers are part of our membership as well. And the primary products that our members are exporting are dried fruits and tree nuts, so walnuts, pistachios, almonds, prunes, figs, raisins, etc. Those are all of our key commodities that we're exporting. We've also recently introduced a new commodity into our program, and that's tomato paste and sun-dried tomatoes. A little bit about the services that we offer. One is our negotiated export ocean freight rates. This is our primary function, and what we do is we work with several carriers. We negotiate these rates for our members, which then they make the bookings under the contracts we have signed with the carriers. We also offer arbitration services in the event there's an issue with the sales. We have partnered with another company to provide marine cargo insurance. We've recently developed a preferred drayage provider program for our members as well. And then we offer industry resources, and again, we advocate on behalf of our membership. Now in 2012, our members exported 21,348 TEUs. Now, about 70% of that cargo is moved in 40-foot dry containers, but 49% of our total cargo is exported during our peak season, which is primarily September through December. That is our peak season. Harvest normally starts in August, and so we really see the outflow of exports striking the calendar in September. Now, January is proving to be a very strong export month, and this is due to various factors. One, it depends on crop carryover. So if we have a particularly large crop, there's more product to be able to export out during the first quarter of the year. And then also Chinese New Year does have an effect on our members' exports. This year it was a bit later than 2012, so that window to be able to move their commodity out of the United States was a lot larger, so we start to see this affect our numbers as we roll into the new year. Now, January this year, we've already exported 27% more than we did in January 2012. And we just saw our February numbers where we've exported 35% more in February this year than the prior year. Now, this is a list of all of the trades that our members are exporting to. As you can see, Asia is our #1 trade with 37% of our total exports going to this destination. Number 2 is the Indian subcontinent with 19%, and Europe is at 17%. With that being said, Asia is our largest trade, and recently, in the last year, we have decided to expand our scope into Asia to make sure we have enough equipment availability, vessel capacity for our members, particularly during peak season. This has worked out very well with our members, and so we've developed a great partnership with our carriers throughout this process. Now, this graph outlines the TEUs by trade, looking at 2009 through 2012. It's hard to see on this graph, but we actually did have a moderate increase into volume. You can see the increase into Asia and Latin America. There was a slight decrease of volume into Europe, Indian subcontinent, the Mediterranean, and Middle East. And for SCTC, we see some of these volume changes due to a couple of factors. One, we're seeing more of the cargo is constantly driven, so it is routed overseas, and that ultimately affects what our members, we're not seeing those numbers, so we don't know exactly what our members are moving unless it is under our contracts. And then the other thing we know, right now carriers are very driven by TEU volumes rather than by revenue. And so these small to medium-sized exporters are, at this time, able to get very, very low rates and are signing their own contracts directly with the steamship lines. We know this is going to be short-lived. It will change. We've seen the ebbs and flows of rates throughout the years, so, but this is something that we are dealing with. Now, Asia, we shipped almost 8,000 TEUs in 2012, and 61% of that cargo went into Hong Kong. Into the Indian subcontinent, we shipped almost 4,100 TEUs, with 77% of that going into Nova Shiva. And lastly, Europe, about 3,500 TEUs, and 43% of that was moved into Rotterdam and Hamburg. Now, if you take these three trade lanes, 73% of our total cargo, so of the 21,000 plus TEUs that we shipped in 2012, 73% of our cargo goes into these three trade lanes. Now, this graph outlines the TEUs by port. So we're looking at 2009 through 2012. You can see our members do utilize the Pacific Northwest, East Coast, and the Gulf. However, majority of our exports go through California. And you can see Port of Oakland is our primary port that our members are exporting out of. And that's based a lot of where our members are located. Our members are primarily located in California. However, they're located Fresno north. So it makes sense for them to use the Port of Oakland. It's easier for them, it's closer. We kind of see that Tulare, Visalia seems to be the cutoff for our members to export out of Long Beach or LA. Now, the Port of Oakland moves 76% of our total volume. And this level has maintained the same over the last 4 years, so there hasn't been much change in that. The Port of LA moves about 11% of our cargo, and we've seen a steady incline in volume over the last 3 years with a 3% increase in 2012. Now, the Port of Long Beach, our members move about 9% of our total volume through this port. And there was moderate growth in 2010 and 2011. However, there was a slight decrease in 2012. Now, in some instances, our rates out of LA and Long Beach are lower than our rates out of Oakland. However, it's not a significant difference. And so to get our members that are located, say, in Fresno to move their cargo via Long Beach or LA, it doesn't offset the drayage costs that they're exposed to versus still exporting out of the Port of Oakland. Now, some of the challenges our members are facing, obviously equipment availability during our peak season is always a concern. Again, our peak season is September through December, so it does coincide with imports. However, we understand there is an imbalance of imports versus exports. And we know that the majority of the imports are coming into Southern California, which offsets this availability since the majority of our cargo is moved out of Oakland. So as a result of this imbalance, our members do sometimes end up having their cargo rolled. This doesn't happen very often. We are very thankful. We have a great partnership with the carriers we work with, but it does happen on occasion. We recently did a carrier survey with our membership, and 83% of them noted that they really don't have any issues with rolled containers. So we are very fortunate. But recently, USDA and AMS, they have started putting out a weekly update called an OSCAR report. And OSCAR stands for Ocean Shipping Container Availability Report. This is published every Wednesday on their website. It's a great tool that we've started sharing with our membership. What USDA and AMS are doing is they work with the eight members of the WTSA. They're getting container availability information throughout the United States, and they're forecasting where the containers are going to be over the next 3-week period. This is crucial, especially when we start getting into our peak season, so our members know if they might be facing any concerns. Another issue, of course, are the chassis changes that have been happening. It hasn't affected our members tremendously. However, the drayage partners that we work with are relying more on chassis pools. But where we have seen the difference, and our drayage partners have confirmed this, is that our shippers are adjusting their pickups to avoid the weekend charges. So traditionally, what many of our shippers were doing is picking up their chassis and container on a Friday, loading on a Saturday at the facility, and dropping the container off back at the port on Monday. That virtually is not happening. It's now happening Monday through Thursday during the business week to avoid those additional daily charges. Of course, bunker costs are always a concern for our members. We know that many of the old refineries are shutting down. The new refineries are much more efficient than they were in the past. The older refineries, about 1 barrel of oil, you could get about 17% bunker fuel out of that. Well, now with these newer refineries, it's about 4% of bunker fuel that you're getting out of 1 barrel of oil. So what does that say in the future? Are carriers going to have to outsource this bunker? What's the cost going to be? And this is very important for our members because they're forecasting the bunker as we get into peak season. They're making their bookings 4 to 6 weeks in advance, and so it's crucial as when they're selling their product. Food-grade containers are a concern. Our members want clean, odorless, and good condition containers. Obviously, again, this goes back to the challenge of the equipment availability in some of the location where our members are shipping. But that is key. It's part of their quality assurance program, and so it does pose challenges when containers are not in this condition. And last, Mother Nature, of course, it's unpredictable and can affect the crop size year to year. Water availability is always a concern. We've had that over the last couple of years with the almond farmers, the folks that grow grapes for raisins. I drive through the valley and I see them picking grapes to lay them out, to dry them for processing into raisins. And it's like you wash your car. You wonder, okay, well, when's the rain gonna hit? Because it always does. Now, to what degree and how it's going to affect that crop, we don't know until it actually happens. But if it's a light rain with nice, warm, sunny days following, it's not an issue. However, if it's a severe rain for several days, cloudy, cool temperatures, that could result in quality issues of that product, such as mold, which then obviously affects the tonnage that's produced and ultimately what's exported. Lastly, I'd just like to say SCTC is anticipating a growth of 3 to 4% in 2013. Obviously, our January and February numbers for this year are leading us on that path, and we hope to have a great 2013. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you, Erica. Ocean carriers are the next link in the supply chain, and our speaker, John McLaurin, president of the Pacific Merchant Shipping Association, or PMSA, since 1995, and will be our next speaker. I think we can safely say he's one of the industry legends. With offices in San Francisco, Long Beach, and Seattle, PMSA is a West Coast maritime trade organization representing ocean carriers and marine terminal operators on a variety of local, state, and federal issues. In addition to PMSA, John has also worked for the Marine Spill Response Corporation, American President Lines, and the American Petroleum Institute. Please welcome a gentleman who knows his business inside and out, and I might add, John is a very shy person and introverted, so you might want to give him a big hand and welcome him up here, reassure him a little bit. John?
Wow, legend. I hope my wife is watching this on webcast. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. That's very kind comments. And I have to add, it's probably the nicest thing any former Sealand employee has said about a former APL employee in the history of the maritime industry. So, I do forgive you for the time that you worked at Sealand. We all have a dark part of our life. So, good morning, everybody, and I do appreciate the opportunity to be here. I thank the Port of Long Beach for the opportunity to be with you today. Just to give you a little bit of background, Pacific Merchant Shipping Association represents ocean carriers, marine terminal operators, and a broad cross-section of companies that do business on the waterfront at the public ports in the state of Washington and Oregon. And I think my members are very much aware of this. I also have the distinct privilege and honor to work with an amazing team of colleagues. Many of you know our folks, certainly the membership does, but they're an extremely talented, hard-working group of people, and it's really an honor to be able to work with them. Even though our members operate all over the world, our interest on their behalf is focused on the West Coast of the United States. We, in essence, are their advocates at a local, state, and sometimes federal level. As an association, we have the same aspiration as West Coast port authorities to grow trade through the gateway ports. Sometimes we have different strategies for getting there, but for the most part, we share the same goals. So it's a pleasure to be here with so many folks from the Port of Long Beach and our port partners. So I would just want to touch on 3 key issues that are facing ocean carriers and West Coast ports. The first is sequestration. Whoop, did I go too far? Nope, got it. John Gold touched upon this, but sequestration is already impacting the ports of Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Hueneme. Customs has eliminated overtime work, which has already forced some adjustments at marine terminals. And next month, the agency has provided notice that they'll be furloughing 10% of the employees, which will compound the problem. Now, John talked about the continuing resolution. That's a big if in terms of what's going to happen, whether those cuts will take place, whether overtime will be restored or partly restored. But if the furloughs are implemented, we expect delays in clearing ships and moving cargo off the docks, and it could put Southern California ports at a disadvantage, as no other ports operate as long hours or rely on custom agents and overtime as we do here. I would just add, as an aside, to acknowledge the work that John Gold has done on a national level. Chris called him a giant. He truly is a leader in the industry, and you will see certainly on the import side, individual companies, trade association, Washington lobbyists really coalesce around John as he takes the lead on issues. I'd also like to thank Mike Perdue and Jojo Cortez and Danny Miranda, who joined with us recently in reaching out to Senators Boxer and Feinstein to outline the concerns that we as an industry have with respect to sequestration and the impacts on customs. The second issue is competition. And Walter talked about this to some degree. In Southern California, because of the much anticipated expanded Panama Canal, there is a Beat the Canal campaign or a Beat the Canal attitude out there. I have a much more simplistic view of the world. We simply need to beat the competition. Competition from the Panama Canal is not a singular event. The canal is a competitor today, and it's going to be a competitor tomorrow and into the future. And an expanded Panama Canal is going to simply offer ocean carriers and cargo interests more opportunities, more options. But there are other competitive threats, such as the Suez Canal and ports throughout North America, whether it's from Prince Rupert, Seattle-Tacoma, ports in Mexico, Gulf and East Coast ports. And there are also, as Walter pointed out, a shifting in the manufacturing base from one country to another. So in my view, instead of focusing on one canal or one port, we should be focusing on what we do well and things that we have some control over, the things that matter most to cargo interests: order, predictability, and cost. And cost especially matter, like $5 billion in California-only state-mandated environmental programs. California Air Resources Board has estimated that the cost of their air mission programs affecting marine terminals, ocean carriers, and the trucking industry is over $5 billion. I'm not arguing over the validity of those programs. They've been a great success. But those are, and I should point out, cost estimates from a number of years ago. They don't include programs and regulatory packages that are on the horizon. They don't include local programs. And these are California-only costs. We don't see this in other states or other countries. There's another issue that we have some concern with, and that's a proposal by the California Association of Port Authorities for an annual general rate increase, one that is automatically imposed without debate or regard to the state of the industry or the financial need of the ports. A competitive state and its ports need to show the customers that their business is valued and simply not treat them like an ATM machine. The third issue is port culture. Every port on the West Coast has a unique culture, often bewildering to ocean carriers, marine terminal operators, and cargo interests, and influencing to a degree where people conduct business and where to make long-term investment decisions. In Seattle, we watch the antics of port commissioners and executive staff play out on the newspaper front page. 2 vacancies. Last year, 1 commissioner ran for another office. This year, 1 commissioner ran from public office by resigning. And we have city and county officials talk about how important port jobs are. And yet, on the other hand, approve a 3rd professional sports arena sandwiched between the BNSF Intermodal Rail Yard and marine terminals. In contrast, the Port of Tacoma is the little engine that could. Singularly focused, quietly going about its business, and enjoying broad community support. And Tacoma reminds me of the old Avis advertising slogan, "We try harder." Oakland lost senior management as a result of well-publicized, embarrassing missteps. Oakland also faced threats a little over a year ago due to the City of Oakland's inability to deal with the Occupy movement, in which the Port of Oakland was shut down on 2 occasions. But now the Port Commission has several new members who appear to be very concerned about the port's long-term viability and their need to focus on core business activities. Without question, Oakland faces a number of competitive, financial, and operational challenges, but with the new commissioners, they seem to be headed in a better direction. In Los Angeles, with a new mayor to be elected in just a matter of months, we may see a dramatic change at the port. Commissioners there serve at the pleasure of the mayor, and the new mayor could oust them and replace all of them with his or her own new people. Such an upheaval would certainly change or could change port priorities and port governance. And the Port of Los Angeles has had a number of unique personalities over the years, but the current commission president, Cindy Mizakowski, is a refreshingly steady hand and has earned the respect of many, and hopefully the new mayor will consider keeping her on. Changes also occur at the Port of Long Beach. Commissioners and staff come and go. Priorities of city government change, all of which is closely followed by port tenants and customers and evaluated with regard to the personalities involved, what their priorities are, and how that will impact core business activities at the port. But Long Beach has something that separates it from most of the competition. It is rarely mentioned, but fully understood and appreciated by the international trade community. The advantage is the people that work at the port. Faith, trust, and respect exist at the Port of Long Beach because of the hard and honest work of the port staff. These are qualities and attributes that are not automatically assumed, bestowed, or transferred. They must be earned, and it starts with the person in charge, and that's Chris Lytle. And while there have been differences of opinion on priorities and policy matters, and Lord knows we've had our fights, The port staff is highly regarded for its integrity, hard work, and honesty. We live in a very, very competitive environment, one that is clearly changing, as Walter's presentation pointed out. But if the Port of Long Beach is to remain competitive, it's going to be due to the efforts of a very talented team. That concludes my remarks. Again, I want to express my appreciation for being here, and also thanks to Art Wong, who supplied me with a few pictures. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, John. Now it's time to talk about the workforce and management. I'm very pleased to tell you that our labor panelists and our management panelists have decided to do a joint presentation. This was their idea, and then I heard about it last night that they were going to combine presentations. I think it's a great idea, and I think it really speaks volumes about kind of where we are now with the labor management relations down here in Southern California. And, you know, I'm very optimistic about it, and I'm looking forward to the presentation from these gentlemen. Michael Podu is president of the Marine Clerks Association, ILWU, Local 63, the second largest ILWU local in the Longshore Division, and the largest Marine Clerks local in the United States. He also sits on the ILWU International Executive Board, representing all divisions of the ILWU within Southern California, and represents the Marine Clerks of LA Long Beach on the ILWU Longshore Division Coast Technology Committee. Mike also sits on the Joint Ports Efficiency Committee and the Los Angeles Long Beach Chassis Stakeholders Committee. Meanwhile, Chad Lindsay is the Vice President of Labor Relations in Southern California for the Pacific Maritime Association. He has primary responsibility for managing and directing the labor relations functions in the Southern California region, including San Diego, Long Beach, Los Angeles, and Port Hueneme. During 19 years in senior level management roles, he also has served as managing director of the APM terminals and accumulated extensive experience in other key sectors of the transportation industry. So please welcome Mike Podu and Chad Lindsay. Guys.
Yeah, well, I think we're going to start off with just a little bit about the PMA, and then Mike's going to talk about the ILWU. We're a multi-employer association made up of 75 companies approximately. Our membership is made up of liner companies, stevedores, and terminal operators. And our principal business is to negotiate and administer the collective bargaining agreement with the ILWU. We represent the maritime industry in all aspects and dealings with nearly 22,000 active workers employed on the west coast of the United States. And as it pertains to today's topic, we're accountable for the registration, transfer, and promotion of the workforce, processing and adding to the casual workforce, and training necessary for all categories of labor.
Morning, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank Chris Lytle, and I'd like to thank the port for inviting labor here today. I think it's important that us and the PMA are here today to bring forth some positive stuff, and I appreciate being invited here today by the port. A little bit about the ILW, that for those that don't know, internationally, the ILW basically represents over 42,000 members, ranging from 60 different unions and locals, I should say, in the states of California, Washington, Oregon, Canada, and Hawaii, as well as recently organized some workers in the Panama Canal. So we truly are international at this point. Locally, where we're at is the Longshore Division. We've been supporting the goods movements in the San Pedro Bay ports for over 75 years, I think. Together with the ports and the companies actually working together, we have driven in this area some of the best working conditions, as well as how we do the job, working together. ILW has been innovative on how to actually make those jobs move a little bit better and quicker on the job and make it easier for the workers too. We represent over 14,000 casual longshore marine clerks and foremen in the area. We administer the collective bargaining agreement, safety code, local agreements, and try to improve working conditions of men and women in the ports on a regular basis. One of the other things that I think that we've done throughout this 75 years collectively is we've been establishing a safety code that's evolving that I think is a model for the country across the United States, is safety conditions for men and women on the docks and in all industries. We've been innovative on things that have come out through these ports that are used across the country. So, you can see the numbers here on the left there in the black. That tells you we're talking about the longshore division on the West Coast. The numbers on the left are the total longshore clerks, foremen, and casuals on the West Coast. The numbers on the right are the numbers showing our workforce in San Pedro Bay ports. And I think it's important to note that at least 70% of the workforce on the West Coast works right here in LA, Long Beach, in Long Beach and LA. One important thing I think to note is the majority of the ILW members also live in the communities that they work in. That's up and down the coast, not just in this area, but if you note, I put a little number there. About 30% of our membership actually lives in the Long Beach area, in the communities directly involved in Long Beach. And I think that's important. And that'll go to my next slide. Again, I'm not an economist, but I do know what jobs do for the economy, and I feel I know what the jobs do for the economy. It's about growth. Over $1 billion in payroll per year is distributed throughout the communities to the local communities. Approximately $300 million goes directly into the Long Beach communities through businesses. And what's important here too is one that we figured that 1 out of every 6 jobs is directly related to the port. And why is that important? And this is where you got to watch the clock on me. So, why is it important to the ports? And why are the ports important? The ports are a public trust, and I believe that ports have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that there are jobs that are created through the ports that drive the local communities and the economy. And I'm not just speaking for the ILWU, I'm talking about the public in those regions in which we live. It's important that we strengthen that tax base. You know, being competitive, we need to be competitive, but we also need to support those communities in which these ports exist. It's important. It's important because not only do our communities and our regions benefit from it, but Long Beach and LA drive California, and that's my true belief. They drive the economy in California, the region, and we need to keep that strong. And that's why I feel that we need to be competitive, and I believe working as a team we can do that. One of the other things I think that's important is the environment, and I want to applaud the ports, in particular Long Beach, and as well as LA. And you've heard a couple of the panelists say that too, with the Clean Trucks program, with the Green Ports policy within the ports. It's important for us as longshoremen because we're on that job on a daily basis, breathing in those toxins. And I want to applaud the ports for their efforts. I remember I came down here over 31 years ago, and the air's quite a lot better than it was then. And it's a lot better working condition for us. But it's also important for our communities because we live in those communities. A lot of us, if you're not directly related to longshore, a lot of us live in those communities and our families, and we need to keep that air quality good, as well as being competitive too. As far as terminals, I'm going to get into a little bit of the technologies, but I also want to applaud the ports for the Middle Harbor Project. We do support the Middle Harbor Project. The LW does support that because we believe it's going to bring good middle-class jobs to the waterfront, but we got to be careful. That's why I'm talking about numbers and what we bring to the economy. I don't think every terminal in the San Pedro Bay ports area is going to go fully automated. I don't believe that. Some form or another they will. But I believe we need to be diversified in these ports because not all cargo fits a particular terminal. And I think we need to be diversified, and I believe we need to attract that various cargoes that come in from the port at different areas. I particularly like to see a lot more break bulk coming in here too, you know, from South America. But I think that's where we're at. The technologies that I would like to see happen in the ports are also green and renewable things that can help out the terminals themselves and save some money for the terminals and be cost effective so we can be more competitive. So.
All right. So manning for the peak demand per our collective bargaining agreement, the Joint Port Labor Relations Committee, the JPLRC, subject to ultimate control of the Joint Coast Labor Relations Committee, exercise control over both the registered and casual list of workers. And the Joint Port Labor Relations Committees are made up of the PMA, our member companies, and the Longshore. JPLRC quarterly reviews of size of registration lists and available work in the port is to be conducted to determine possible additions. I must note that these assessments are retrospective, not forecast. The ability to provide a 5-day of work per week to all registered workers must be evaluated given the fact that we have contract guarantees. And viable casual pool to fill excess labor orders, and I'll get into a little more on the casual pools later on.
Just a little note on this because we got to make this real a little bit because we don't always agree on everything. But our concern too is to make sure that our registered workforce is up and not relying on a casual workforce. We're going to talk about that a little bit as the slides go on. But this is one of the areas where we go back and forth, but we always meet in the middle at some point. So for us, keeping our registered workforce is a viable, and I think it actually, well, we'll go on and I'll continue with that in a minute. You got to go that way.
Yeah. So what PMA does from a forecasting and analysis, since the collective bargaining agreement only provides retrospective analysis, in 2004, the labor shortage, PMA only used a collective bargaining agreement to right-size the workforce. During 04 and 05, the Pacific Maritime put together this strategic business analysis. They're responsible for all our forecasting and analysis now. The SBA works with our member companies to provide a 12-month sliding forecast. We take those forecasts and we regionalize them. We review the projection, try to make a correlation to manpower, and then we look at attrition rates, and then we look at all the potential issues that could affect manpower. And I've mentioned some of them, and I know Mike wants to speak on a few of them. So.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we don't get back, and I don't believe we will. I think we've learned from the 2004 labor shortage. One of our things for the union is trying to keep those levels up. We don't want to have to go back into an area where we're trying to register and get a big casual workforce again. Currently, if you saw the numbers earlier, we have nearly 6,000 casuals left over from that 2004 process. So that was an 18,000. It was a big deal, and we don't want to have to be scrambling at the last minute trying to do that. So I think there's been some movement to make the levels kind of constant and keep up with it. One of the things that I did want to drive home here a little bit today also, and John have both talked about it, is sequestration. I really truly believe that's a concern. How that's impacted these ports at this point, I don't know. But the fear is and I'm glad that we've done that together with the PMSA and the other presidents within the locals. We need to be on top of it, and we need to reach out to, like we have said, our senators, Boxer and Feinstein, and our local elected representatives to stay on top of this. It's imperative, especially in a port like ours, and the way we've worked for a number of years, is we've always been in overtime ports. Not all ports are like that. East Coast is a little bit different. Even our northern brothers up in the Northwest are a little bit different. But to be competitive in this port, we need to be on our officials to make sure we are effective. Because we do work those night gates, we do work, overtime shifts, and we don't want to have a backlog of vessels sitting out here in the harbor at some point if we don't stay on top of it. So, I think it's something collective that we need to work together, and that's what I like to get out there today, is about us working collectively to get to the one common goal.
All right. So the 2013 PMA member company forecast came in at 1.2%. When we do those forecasts, we look at them, we also consider a number of other organizations and their forecasts, such as Jewelry, Global Port Tracker, and we look at the ports LA and Long Beach at what their projections are. So once you get the right amount of number of people in, then you got to right size it. So to right size the workforce, the optimal number of individuals in each category is determined and necessary adjustments are made. We must ensure that we have right numbers in the right place. And those processes include casual processing, longshore registration, foreman promotion, clerk transfers, and then we got to look at our skilled operator training, and some examples of those would be crane, side top, and heavy lift.
Training, and where are we at right now with training? We're talking about technology and automation of terminals. And that's why this is where it's something that's really close to my heart. As we move into the future for the ILWU, in order to be competitive, we know we're going to be here, and training is dear to my heart. It's working, how do I put this? There are those employers out there, and we're out there to embrace the technology. You've got Middle Harbor Project in LA, you got the TradePack facility that's modernizing. To keep a viable workforce and to be competitive, you want the best people on the job. And that's what we want. We want to be the people out there on the job, knowing what we're doing, and have a viable, comprehensive training program provided by the employer. I want to commend the representatives and management from Middle Harbor, because they brought us along. There needs to be a certain amount of transparency between us to get to that point. I am going to say this, historically, that has not always happened. But I want to thank OCL in particular and Long Beach Container Terminal, because they brought us along through the process. Middle Harbor is a great, great project for the port, not only bringing in good construction trade jobs to build that, as well as the bridge that supports the community. But with Middle Harbor, they brought us along. There's not secrets out there. So with that comes a certain amount of trust. And each step of the way, we were fortunate enough with the Port of Long Beach and OCL to go to Hong Kong and see what it looks like in another country. And then we get here, there's meetings set up with that. We need that for our mechanics, because it's going to look different out there, a fully automated terminal. The technologies out there are going to look different. And we want to be at the top of the curve there when it comes to it, because we want to be the people doing the work. Not all, and I'm going to be honest with you, not all employers have that same business model. And I hope that changes, because I think it's imperative. We're all here together. The ILWU, with the PMA and all the employers, we want this to be the best port complex, which to me it currently is and will be for a long time. But we want to keep it there. We want to attract those jobs. And we want to be that positive face out there because we are the labor. And part of that is built with the employers. So we're looking we're looking forward to that, kind of excited about it, to see what it's going to be like, but we also want to be a part of that.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the processes and timelines as it pertains to training and bringing in numbers of the workforce. A collective bargaining agreement provides a number of these processes and procedures, and they must be followed in order to accomplish additions to the workforce and training. And I'm just going to touch on some of these. Obviously, we need joint agreement between ourselves and the ILWU. There are signups for training, which need to be posted for 30 days. There's seniority, and that must be respected and afforded. And then we've got scrubbing of the list. Once you get these sign-up lists, it takes us a while to go through and make sure that everybody that signed up was qualified, they've paid their union dues, and a lot of other things we look at to ensure that they're up for their training. And then we've got testing. And when you get into testing, we've got physicals. We want to make sure that they're fit for duty. We've got drug and alcohol testing for skilled operators. And then we've got an aptitude test for our clerical workforce. So I'm going to touch on this a little later because it affects how we look at our peak season planning, these processes and timelines.
And just one note on this too. Hopefully we get to that point where we get a level within our registration list where that we're not doing big groups of people again when we come to transfers and everything like that, and go through an attrition type processes, because we've had a lot of turnover within our division, with a lot of people retiring, especially since the 2002 in particular, but 2008, we've had an exodus of people retiring. Hopefully one day I'll be there. But we need to keep, instead of, what part of the problem is the process that we have takes time. So if we can get to a certain level that's comfortable for both parties, and then we do an attrition type basis, I think it'll be more conductive and an easier flow.
Casual workforce, I said I'd talk a little more about it in an earlier slide, but we believe it's essential to filling labor during peak demand. They represent, usage between 0 and 30% on a given shift during that peak. Excuse me. But you got to recognize that they're not eligible for all jobs. They're not the end-all solution to peak demands. But what I listed there was the jobs they can take. They take basic longshore and clerk jobs. They're able to drive tractor and then take some key clerk jobs.
Casual workforce for us. It's, if you, again, you saw the numbers earlier, there's nearly 6,000 casuals still in the pool that we have. For the unions, again, I want to emphasize the fact that for us, I believe that having a regular, strong workforce where we have people, you have a casual workforce that works approximately anywhere from one day a month to 2 days a month to possibly 2 days a week. And they don't really get the training that they need. I believe that when you have a larger, well-trained, registered workforce, it makes it better for both parties. It makes it better on the foreman in the morning when they come in and they don't have to line up somebody that hasn't been on the job for 3 months, or because not everybody works on a regular basis. And it makes it easier for the clerk, the chief supervisors and the supercargos, when they come in the morning and have to line somebody up on a computer. If you have a well-established, well-trained workforce, it's better for the employer, because I think the time starts are better also, as well as it's better for the individual. And that's the other thing that we always look at. It's better for the individual that's trying to provide for his family. When they do come in, they do know that they are a casual workforce, that they're going to work just to fill in the extra work. But part of our belief is that every man and woman out there should have a good job, good benefits, and it makes for a better, happier worker when they come to work in the morning.
So the key factors to our success to making it through the peak season, one are accurate projections, which may be an oxymoron. Cooperation agreement, to get these programs going, it takes quick and agreements to move these things. Communication with the entire supply chain, things like today, so we're up and abreast of all potential issues affecting their segment that could affect ours. Things like sequestration we talk about today. You get a late start on a ship, and it could increase our labor demands by 10% if we're losing productivity. So we got to have a proactive approach based on these projections. because our processes and procedures that I spoke to a few slides ago, they don't permit a timely reaction. Well, I kind of went through that for that purpose. With the signups and a lot of things we do, sometimes it takes 3 months to get someone trained or someone into an addition to the workforce. So projections and a proactive approach are key to our success. And last of all, utilization and capacity, which I know Mike wants to speak to a little bit.
Keys to success, where are we going to go? Where are we going to be? I think it takes everybody in this room and people at this table, not only our employers, the carriers, the cargo owners, we all have an interest in this port, and working together is a key factor for me. I know Vic is going to talk a little bit later about the chassis stakeholder group. I feel privileged and honored that I was invited to sit on that committee. It brings in all the parties and all the stakeholders to look for solutions for turn times on the terminals in regards to chassis and talking about chassis pools. I think it's imperative that we work together on these things. One of the other things that the ILW has supported is SCIG with the BNSF. I think it's important because these are things that enhance the terminals, make it better for the terminals, make it better for the communities. I think that's what's important. So I think if we work together, everybody in this room, to get to the common goal, there's enough out there for everybody. But to be competitive, we need to work together and not be adversarial with each other. We need to work together, and we can make this, and again, it is, to me, it's still the greatest port in the United States and the world. So let's work together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Chad, for that very positive message. Now it's time to take a look at marine terminals. Our next speaker is relatively new to SSA Marine, joining SSA parent company Carix as CEO and Chief Strategic Officer last year. But Knut Stupger has more than 35 years of experience in the transportation, terminal operations, and logistics industries. After 30 years with Maersk, where he rose from trainee to the top levels of that company management, Knut joined ER Capital Holding Group in Hamburg in 2008 as a partner, serving as CEO of one of the group's subsidiaries, ER Schiffert Company, which is a leading maritime service provider within container, bulk, and offshore businesses. He was named Vice Chairman of ER Capital Holding in 2010. Seattle-based SSA Marine and its affiliates provide cargo handling and transportation services at more than 150 seaport facilities worldwide, including 4 shipping terminals operations that move about half of the cargo at the Port of Long Beach. Please welcome Knut Stupger. Thank you.
Good morning, and thanks for the introduction, Chris. It's nice to be here to be able to address this forum, and I thought it useful to get started with a backdrop. There we go. Of what is surrounding us in the industry as major trends at the moment. First, we remain a growth industry. It is an industry that will evolve over time, and this means we also will be forced to be able to handle larger volumes during this time. Whether the volumes will double in 12 years or 15 years or more years, only time will show us, but we know that we will see the increases coming. In the near term, as we have also seen from some of my colleague panelists here, the volume developments, they're somewhat harder to predict. This year we may see a growth that's slightly ahead of the growth we saw last year, but maybe not to the full extent of the historic average that we have seen. Second, for our customers, the shipping lines, the latest few years have been tough on financial returns, which is all largely to do with supply and demand. While rates have been competitive, market volumes have not expanded as a result of that. Whereas on the supply side, shipyards, they have lowered their asking prices for new vessels, and that does impact supply of future capacity. So as a result, finances have been challenged, and this invariably causes pressure to take cost out of the system, and terminal operators, they have not been exempt in that process like any other of the suppliers. One way to reduce cost has been for the lines to upsize their capacity, upsize the ships. This delivers very significant scale benefits through reduced slot costs per TEU mile. This obviously has a significant impact on the terminal business as well, since we have to continue to invest to stay relevant to handle these larger ships. The advantages of the big ships materialize when utilization is high, so as a consequence, many of the lines, they have entered into various alliances, slot swaps, VSAs, and so on. And this is another of the trends I think that's worth watching for all of us, since this creates a layer of added complexity to the business that we are all having to handle. And finally, I think one of the significant points, and we have heard that a little earlier this morning, is the increasing importance that the public agenda is playing. We have to continue to make sure we are very good neighbors in the areas that we operate, environmentally as well as in all other aspects. So a lot is being done in that regard from the terminal side, and a lot will continue to be done. I thought to illustrate the point on the larger ships, if I can get this to work, here we go. Just to illustrate the evolution, 25 years ago, President Truman was the largest container vessel afloat, which was with a capacity of 4,500 TEUs. 10 years later, approximately, the Regina Maersk was launched with 7,400 TEU capacity. So over a 10-year period, that was an expansion of 60%. This year, or in a few months' time, we will see the first of the triple E type being launched from a shipyard. That will be with a capacity of 18,000 TEU, which is 400% up on the Truman only 25 years ago, and it is 2.5 times up in only 15 years. It is worth to remember when we order our container cranes and everything else that goes on around us. So to illustrate how that impacts us at the container terminals, some of the main issues, infrastructure readiness obviously is an important item for cranes, for berths, for yards, gates. Everything has to be able to cope with these larger capacity bursts that are coming in. Likewise, the connectivity for road and rail will be very important, and in total, the whole logistics system has to work. There will be very little buffer capacity, little buffer time for us to be allowed to have any slowdown in the logistic chain. It has to work. I mentioned already productivity and cost as some of the important items. IT capabilities will continue to be very important to enhance and to accelerate in order that we continue to move the needle in the right direction. In SSA Marine, we have placed a lot of emphasis on the IT side. We have a sister organization, TightWorks, which is one of the leading technology solution providers for terminal IT structures worldwide, which places us in a very unique position to provide the right solutions to all our stakeholders, importers, exporters, rail and truck, and certainly the lines as well. Going forward, the opportunities that we see is continued, as we heard also from the previous presentations, continued closer coordination and cooperation. We need to continue to work on the forecasting. On the planning side, we need to be able jointly to find the idle time that is sitting in the system as buffer and be able to take that out. IT enhancements certainly are important, as is automation. And on the automation side, this is also something that we at SSA Marine has been working closely on for quite a few years. And I'd like to take you on a small tour on where that actually is sitting in the container terminal side at the moment. We have had two focus areas. In doing this, we have had our customers at the gates, that means the truckers, and we have had our customers at the berth, that means the liner companies or the ships. And in all what we have been doing here, we have done it with an emphasis on safety. We have wanted to try and enhance safety wherever it was possible, whenever we have achieved some of the automated structures. At the gate, I can mention we were the first to go paperless. So the old interchanges and the old gate passes that we all knew, they're no longer required. In fact, the trucker no longer need to do anything as far as signatures and so forth is concerned. So when arriving to a terminal, this is where the trucker passes through an OCR gate. This is an optical character recognition reading of the truck, the trailer, and the container, where we keep an electronic log of all of this. We have decided for weather-covered OCR gates because that enhances our accuracy on the reading. We are currently achieving 98% reading accuracy, and the speed with which a truck can go through, if they want to, is up to 30 miles per hour, and we can still achieve this recognition. We go for the paperless and the gate pedestal. So this is the first actual stop that a truck will have when it comes into the terminal. There's a phone here where the driver talks to the clerk with details, for instance, a booking number. The data that was previously taken at the OCR gate has meantime been transferred to the clerk's screen, so all the details are automatically available. The data from the OCR gate at the same time has been handled in the computer system. So the container has already been pre-assigned a location in the yard. So basically all the driver now has to do is to look at a computer screen at this pedestal to note the position that the driver should proceed to, and they're good to go. From the three terminals that we operate here in Long Beach, the clerks, they all operate at a central gate. That means that they simply get allocated the next job that is in line, which makes peak handling much, much more effective. The added benefit is that the clerks, they actually enjoy this environment very much. Quality, training, and so forth is much better handled, and therefore we also have seen that the productivity has increased as a result. We have the auto in and out gate structure, principally the same as already highlighted. So on an auto out gate, for instance, the system checks that the truck company, the license number match with the container number, and as soon as this match is done, the driver can automatically proceed when the arm lifts up to the next point. The same is valid on the in-gate, provided the trucking company has submitted the details. These are the details that are required in an electronic form. We will soon release this same, as you see here on the screen, as an app for handheld devices so that the driver in the cab actually is able to fill this out and get the benefit of going faster through the gate in, gate out process. We will at the same time provide specialized lanes for these trucks that have utilized this feature in order to accelerate and speed up the process for them. Once the box are in the yard, whether it comes from the ship side or the gate, a real-time location system keeps a log of all the movements that we have. So from, for instance, the ship side, we have, you'll see up here on the crane, on the beam, we have some OCR scanners that are reading the container numbers, and the system automatically determines where the container will go in the yard. When that container lands on the bump cart, the hostel driver automatically receive a location number, the location data, on a screen inside his cab, which is also shown on an LED display on the hostler itself, and he can immediately proceed to the right location. This same principle is followed in the yard, where the yard hostler and the trucks both are being handled. All is based on RFID tags, both on the trucks and the hostler, and basically the top handler here reads this information off. It comes up on a display in the top handler's cab, and the driver knows automatically what to do. All of this data that's being processed this way is automatically logged, and it is based on a live update logged into the overall system. Now, for those of you that's in the trucking side of business here, you know one of the hardest tasks for a terminal is to secure a good turn time for the trucker on an import delivery. Invariably, the box that you want to bring out is always placed at the bottom of the stack, which causes a lot of extra movements and loss of time. Our system now is that when a truck arrives at the actual gate, the transtainer driver will have a display in his cab showing up in a green field that will show that somebody is entering the terminal to touch this box. So the driver of the transtainer now knows that whenever he's moving some boxes around there, he should not overstow this box because somebody will want to pick that up pretty soon. When the truck driver arrives under the transtainer and the transtainer moves up and down in the lane, the color on this green box will now be framed with a yellow frame, and the transtainer driver knows automatically that the truck is in position, ready to take the load. He will pick up the container and the truck can be off right away. Next stop for the truck will be the gate security, where we check the license plate, the RFID on the truck, and the driver's ID, and provided all of this matches, the truck is good to go. I will, in the interest of time, cut through a couple of these and just show you one thing, because actually we are also able to do this now on the ship-to-shore side. The way it works is that when the container crane is in position over the ship's bay, the driver of the crane will move the spreader over the container bay once. That will provide the profile of the actual bay in an automated function, and based on this profile, the container crane will now be able to move basically automatically from ship to shore. The only thing the driver has to do is to hit one of these buttons you see here in order to discharge or load containers. As the container cranes, they have become much larger. The distance between the driver and down to a sail guide on a ship or the truck bump cart on the shore side has become much, much greater. And we think that this automation will benefit everybody and will certainly create a lot of flexibility for us in order to be able to handle the peak season that we hope all will see. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you, Knut. Now it's time to talk about the railroads. Stephen Bobb was just appointed Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for BNSF Railway in January 2013, but he's had a long and varied career with the company, learning all aspects of the business. He is responsible for BNSF sales, marketing, customer service, economic development, and business unit activities. BNSF Railway is one of North America's leading freight transportation companies, operating on 32,000 route miles of track in 28 states and 2 Canadian provinces. He began his career with BNSF in 1987 and has served in a variety of high-level executive roles. I think we can say that this is a man who knows what it takes to make BNSF Railway tick. Stephen Bobb. Stephen?
Thank you, Chris. Good morning. I want to thank the Port for this opportunity to be with you this morning. And I also want to recognize our supply chain partners that are here with me this morning. We appreciate the working relationship we have with you because we know it is truly a supply chain with every party having a role. And also, I want to thank our customers who are present here. It's your business that is the reason why we exist to provide a service. So thank you very much for the opportunity to create value for you. And if you have freight moving in the United States that's not moving on BNSF, I encourage you to have a conversation with us about the value we can create for you. What I want to do this morning is we've had an update on what the expectations are for the economics coming into this fall peak, what the various issues are that components of the supply chain will face, is I want to talk really about two things. First, I want to touch on the position that BNSF is in coming into peak and our readiness, if you will, for this fall. And then I want to spend some time talking about the things that we are doing to continue preparing for the subsequent peaks that are going to come in 2014 and 15 and 2019. So we'll talk about that as well. So really, I'll jump to the punchline and the bottom line first. BNSF is absolutely ready for this fall peak, and you know, that's something that I can say, and you can say, well, why is that? And I think it really boils down to three reasons why we're ready for fall 2013. The first is we have demonstrated capability, and I'll talk about that. We have deep experience in this business. Intermodal is a very important part of our company, and we'll talk about that. And we also have a desire to grow, and that's something that I think we have a demonstrated track record of in the past, and certainly a desire to grow going forward, because we think growth creates value for our customers, it creates value for our employees, it creates value for the communities that are served along our network, and certainly demonstrates value to our owner. So it's very easy for me to say that we have capability, experience, and a desire to grow, but how these play out in reality for our customers is really what the important thing is. So I want to talk about that. First, when you look at BNSF's position in the intermodal industry, it is a significant part of our business, and we're the largest participant in that from a rail perspective. So certainly we bring demonstrated experience when it comes to handling this business. You can see that intermodal is a very important part of our company. Just looking at 2012, in terms of actual units handled, intermodal is the fastest growing part of our company, and it's the largest part of our company. And it's something that we see continuing into the future. If we look at it from a volume perspective, you can see that during the Great Recession, our intermodal volume definitely decreased, and certainly our container volume decreased a lot over that period of time. What this chart masks quite a bit is because of the domestic growth in our business and the conversion of domestic trailers to domestic containers, that container line doesn't show as big of a drop as really occurred in our international container business. So certainly our international volume is down more than the container part of these bars would suggest. And so that's clearly, we've got the capacity and capability that we had in 2006 and 7, and we've added to that capacity and capability since then. So we're clearly positioned from a capability perspective when it comes into 2013. But I think it's important to state that BNSF is not, and we believe the supply chain can't be complacent about our current position. Certainly there is some existing latent capacity, but when we look out into the future, we know that there's going to be continuing demand for growth, and we can approach that growth in really one of three ways. We can thoughtfully position and prepare to handle it in the most effective way possible. We can react to it when it gets here, or we can let that volume and the economic impact enter the U.S. economy and our customers make choices other than us, and that certainly would be the worst choice. We have a definite desire to grow, and I'll touch on this from two different perspectives. When we look at our domestic business, that is an area that through the Great Recession has sustained our intermodal network in terms of bringing volume onto it and giving us the capability to continue adding capacity, because this is a virtuous cycle. As we bring on volume, that gives us the capability to add more capacity. As we add capacity, it gives us the capability to bring on more volume and create more value. And so during the recession downturn, our domestic business has continued to grow because we've provided value to bring new customers to intermodal and also to grow that base business. When we look at the network that we serve in the western U.S., and we look at the volumes that are on rail intermodal today, it's a very small part of what's possible. And if we just take an overlay of the volumes that fit into our existing domestic network and look at the possibility of converting them, there's an additional 9+ million units that we can see converting to the rail network, creating value for the customers, creating value for the communities along those routes, and certainly bringing all the economic and environmental benefits of that rail conversion. So we are really focused on this, and it's something that we're going to continue paying attention to, not at the exclusion of our international import business, because we want to do it all. If you're interested in this concept, you can look at our website. There's a tool there. You can go in and look at how you can convert to BNSF online all by yourself, or if you want to give us a call, we can have a more deep consultation with you. The second area of growth is what we're doing jointly with the supply chain here in the Long Beach area. And we see the port and the various parties in the port making the investments to enable future growth. And we think that there's a great example here of new terminal development that sends a message to our customers around the globe that this part of the supply chain is ready, willing, and able to create value for our customers that want to bring goods into North America. And so we think the messaging being done here in terms of how the Port of Long Beach is positioning itself for the future is very important, and this is a great example. Looking forward, we also have the capability I don't have the capability with the remote, but BNSF has the capability to make the financial investments necessary to support this growth. 2013, we announced the largest ever rail capital expenditure plan of $4.1 billion. And that's money that's going into maintaining and growing our infrastructure, our terminals, our locomotives. And you can look at this over the business cycle. Our capital expenses have decreased as business demand decreased, We're certainly able to respond and increase as the business opportunities increase. But most importantly, the money going into the infrastructure to maintain it, to keep it viable, robust, and safe for that future demand never wavered during that downturn. And that's something that we are very proud of. We've continued our approach to providing that interior destination capability to take the products that come in from the West Coast, move them highly efficiently into interior logistics parks, and move them into the destination portion of the supply chain, continuing the development that we began in Chicago in 2002 with our logistics park there, and continuing through current times as we've begun construction of Logistics Park Kansas City, that when it is commissioned this fall, will bring the capability for 500,000 lifts with an ability to grow to 1.5 million lifts as our customer demand requires. We also have spent a fair amount of time, money, and effort on adding capacity here within the San Pedro Bay. And this is artist's rendition of our Southern California International Gateway that has been in the works for quite a long time and has reached some very important approval steps, and we're ready to get in the next phase of this project, and we're excited about it. We're excited about it because we think it sends a message to the rest of the world about BNSF and the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach's ability and willingness to support and provide for that growth. So we think this is a great project, and we're very excited that it's moving forward. As this project moves forward, it will become part of a very robust BNSF network that connects various geographies within North America to the rest of the world and provides that customer benefit of being able to handle freight from wherever you want to handle it to wherever you want to take it. And so we think that creates tremendous value for our customers and, quite frankly, for the U.S. economy. Next generation intermodal is one of the market concepts that we've begun a couple of years ago, and I do want to talk a little bit about it because it is all about the customer. And it's not about BNSF, but it's about the value we can create for customers. For international intermodal, it's really a collaborative approach to figuring out what is the best solution for our customers. Not the best reasons why we should shoehorn you into some existing set of infrastructure that we've got, but a way to figure out the best value for the customer. It's a way to help the customers understand which terminals, which on-dock facility capabilities, which off-dock facility capabilities, which transload capabilities. How do we tailor our ability to flex our participation in the supply chain to meet the customer's needs? And it gives our customers unprecedented flexibility, reliability, and visibility to what's going on in their supply chain. Certainly, when we commission Southern California Intermodal Gateway, it will be a very green part of our network, and it brings tremendous advantages to our network. The existing green advantages that rail brings to the economy are very substantial, but we think that SCIG will continue in that tradition of creating a very net positive environmental impact. So in summary, we are ready for this fall, and we are positioning ourselves to be ready for what comes in the future, because we think that investments made today will pay off with capabilities we provide to the marketplace tomorrow and in years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Now let's talk trucks. Victor LaRosa will be our speaker today. Vic's career spans more than 30 years in all facets of transportation, including operations and sales development. In 1989, he co-founded Total Transportation Services, Inc., or TTSI. As CEO, he's responsible for business development and strategic planning. The company is an asset-based logistics provider distributing imports within the United States, Canada, and Mexico. In addition to TTSI, Vic is a founding member of the Coalition for Responsible Transportation, a member of the Waterfront Coalition Board of Directors, a board member of the Harbor Trucking Association, and chairman of the Southern California Intermodal Steering Committee for the California Trucking Association. His next goal, to be a zero-emissions trucking company through the use of fuel cell and hydrogen technology. Vic is always out there at the leading edge. Please welcome Vic LaRosa. Vic.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chris. Again, my name is Vic LaRosa, and today I stand here as a representative of the Harbor Trucking Association. My presentation will be divided into two sections, one on challenges and one on solutions. The Harbor Trucking Association came into existence as a result of the Ports Clean Air Action Program. As many of you know, most of us know it as the Clean Truck Program. The HTA represents about 60% of the trucks that service the Southern California ports. Our membership continues to grow, and our financial support continues to grow. We are also receiving a lot of political support, and our group's influence in the industry is becoming more significant. But let me frame our mission. We are an advocacy group. We advocate for the licensed motor carrier, the individual that operates the truck, and the shipping public, because that is our mutual customers. We also want to be framed as a solutions-oriented group, and we want to avoid the use of legislation to achieve our goals. Let's look at some of our greatest challenges, and some of these were touched on this morning by various presenters. Our first challenge is the misclassification of the independent owner-operator. Our second challenge is turn times. Our third challenge is chassis, and of course, I think Jonathan touched on our hours of service challenge. Misclassification of independent owner-operator. Let's be clear. We are not anti-employee driver, but we are pro-choice. Many of our members have found that the driver-employee model is better fit for certain types of business. However, we also have to keep in mind that the independent owner-operator model has been used in our industry since the 1980s. This is over 30 years of a tried and effectively proven system. Also, this model is and has been the path to the American dream of owning your own business. This is how many of us started our companies. Recently, we have seen tremendous amount of state and federal agencies using taxpayer dollars to place unnecessary audits, hearings, and now court cases on our industry. This activity has been placing a heavy administrative and financial burden on our businesses. Most of these efforts are backed by organized labor for their own political gain, yet at a high expense to our industry. Now let's discuss turn times, and let's hope this works, Art. This is a video that was taken a week ago on Tuesday, March 19th at 5:45 p.m. This is very typical of what we experience every day at the terminals, and we believe it is important to share it with this audience. We all know that this queue is a result of the Peer Pass program, but please keep in mind that we see similar queues at lunches and breaks. As an LMC, this creates one of the biggest obstacles to servicing our common customers. We have to figure out a better way. Turn times. The cost of emissions is going to continue to grow. We all know that AB 32 is on the horizon. And the greatest way to offset the cost of these are through productivity gains. But since the implementation of the Clean Truck Program, we have not seen these expected gains. In fact, we've seen a reversal of productivity. Improved productivity directly affects the driver or contractor pay, as well as lowers the overall cost to the shipping public. The Harbor Trucking Association recently commissioned E2 Managed Tech to conduct its own turn time study by terminal. This will be an ongoing study. This morning I am going to share some preliminary results of that study. Please keep in mind that these results have not been audited by a third party yet, but we have every intention of doing so as the study continues. For the month of February, a relatively slow volume month, E2 surveyed almost 1,300 trucks, representing almost 25,000 moves. Here's the results of that survey. As you can see, the average visit time is from 1 hour and 13 minutes to almost 2 hours. For the purpose of productivity gains and profitability for the independent owner-operators, the turn times must be under 1 hour. Therefore, as a group, the HTA's next steps are to meet individually with marine terminal operators to discuss the results of the turn time study and work towards a solution that will benefit all stakeholders. This graph shows the turn times of one of the better performing terminals. As you can see, represented by the blue line, only about 60% of the moves hit our target of 1 hour turn time. Here is a graph of another terminal showing that approximately 20% of the moves are hitting the 1 hour turn time. Now let's look at this from a different perspective. Using numbers published by PeerPass, which is the organization owned and operated by Marine Terminals, even their data confirms that only 12% of the trucks get 5 moves, not round trips, per day. And 5 moves could be, just the return of empties. It doesn't necessarily, relate to round trips. Here's the only issue with that number. No one has ever asked the trucking community how many moves are necessary in order for a truck to be profitable. Our membership feels the answer is 6 or more moves per shift. At 5 moves, we're barely breaking even. Okay, moving on to challenge number 3, chassis. In today's market, there are 24 steamship lines, 13 terminals, 10 chassis pools, and variable gates. 10 chassis pools is an administrative nightmare for the entire shipping community, just not the truckers. It affects everyone in the supply chain. This is an eye chart, so I'm not going to bore you with the details, but this was a survey just done recently by 4 licensed motor carriers, and it was done over a 2-week period. We just wanted to take a snapshot. All of the codes shown here are non-revenue codes. Codes 10 and 20, low inventory and roadability, at this point in time are non-issues because we're in a low volume period. But as the volume increases, we will see these numbers grow. But the real burden to our industry are the dry runs and gate closures for certain steamship lines at varying times. Dry runs can be caused by closed areas, or they can be closed by a marine terminal actually having the gate open but not offering service for that particular steamship line. As our turn time study matures, we are going to provide a lot more information on these types of events. Challenge number 4, hours of service. Jonathan did a very, very good job of explaining that effective July 1, 2013, the trucking industry as a whole will be subject to a 34-hour restart. That means the driver has to be down for 34 hours. In that 34-hour period, 2 evenings of him being off duty have to be between the hours of 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. This is a serious issue in Southern California since we do a vast majority of our work between 1 and 5 a.m. Let's move on to solutions. We need the help of all stakeholders. This includes the ports, the marine terminal operators, the steamship lines, the ILWU labor, the beneficial cargo owners, and the trucking community. With respect to chassis, we have to go to a gray or neutral pool. You've heard a lot this morning about the stakeholders group that was formed by the ports. That group is making great gains. We have to sustain that effort, and we have to move to a gray or neutral pool, meaning that we can use any chassis in any terminal. This, along with a dynamic appointment system, which uses predictive analytics, has to be implemented at the marine terminals. We have the data. We know 10 to 14 days in advance what's on a ship. And we also know that the software exists. It's in the marketplace. These are the same type of systems that are used by the airlines to schedule flights. It's also the same types of systems that are used by the better retailers to run their businesses. If you ever notice is when you walk into a Kroger's or one of the more advanced retailers that you'll see lines start to back up at the checkout counter, and then all of a sudden, multiple registers will open up and the lines will just disappear. That's all done through predictive analytics. We can do that at our gates. Regarding the hours of service, the industry needs to put in a daily driver rule. We are working very, very closely with the California Trucking Association and the American Trucking Association to get to the feds to put in place a daily driver rule. And basically it states if a driver starts and stops at point A each day, he should be subject to a 24-hour restart. The hours service rules should be modified for the business model that is used in our ports. If we can achieve these goals, and these are relatively low-hanging fruit, we will see productivity gains, we will see our ports remain competitive, we will eliminate the possibility of diversion, and we will see overall greater gains throughout the supply chain. I'd like to thank you this morning for your time, and I also have to put a plug in for the Harbor Trucking Association. We are having a fundraiser this evening at the Shoreline Yacht Club. You are all invited, but we need the funds to continue this study and to continue these work. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you, Vic. It's been great information this morning, and we've had a lot of speakers. They've done a great job. Let's have a hand for all of the speakers. They've done an excellent job. And I have to say, as an audience, you guys have done a great job too. I know it's been a long morning, 2.5 hours. I didn't see a lot of movement out there. Everybody's been really good. We're almost out of time, but I would like to try to get a few questions in if we can. And you can either address those generally, or you could address them to an individual. We have mics in the aisles here. Is there anyone that has questions at this point? I see Bill Mongaluso sitting there, and usually Bill is always up here, so we must have answered all of the possible questions, Bill, right? I've got a couple of things Art gave me that have come in over the, now I can't see it. Thank you, Art. Okay, why don't you, Art, I can't read this. Would you read it too? Read it. Read it in the mic there.
As manufacturing shifts to South Asia, what is the impact on the port, on the West Coast ports?
Okay, who would like to take that? Okay.
One more time.
Can you repeat it one more time, Chris?
As manufacturing shifts to South Asia, what is the impact on the shipments coming through the West Coast ports?
Okay, well, maybe I can start it off. I think it's, overall, I think we would see that as a positive trend. Really, this gateway of LA and Long Beach is still pretty well positioned on anything coming from anywhere from Singapore up through northern Asia, up through Japan, Korea, so in northern China as well. I think anything generally that falls below Singapore into Southeast Asia or the Indian subcontinent obviously would probably lend itself to more trends in the Suez service going through the Suez Canal in that way. But I think as business moves down into South Asia, you know, even parts of Southeast Asia, I still think it'll be probably pretty good for our ports. Anyone like to add to that? Okay, the question is the shift to Mexico. You know, we're kind of waiting to see what the impact of how much of this manufacture is reshoring or coming back to this area. You know, I think it could have an impact. I think that's something that we just have to watch very closely and just kind of monitor and see. Right now, of course, as you know, there's not any kind of real coastal traffic coming up from Lazaro or you know, any of the other smaller Mexican ports, Ensenada, up into Los Angeles, Long Beach area. It's very, very, very small. But that's something that I think bears watching because Mexico is clearly growing. Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chris. I actually have a question. But first, I'd like to take a moment to thank the Division of Trade and Communications at the Port of Long Beach for putting on this event. They did a fantastic job, and I don't think they ever get enough credit. So,
Good, thank you.
But I actually have a question for John Gold, and with all due respect to all the individuals in this room that are a very big part of this industry, John, you're probably the most influential person in the room to answer this question, at least. Sequestration is impacting our ports. I work in the Port of LA as a marine clerk, and I'm seeing the gates getting shut down early. Truckers are actually locked in terminals for a couple hours until the night shift starts right now. Customs doesn't have overtime, so CBP just packs up and they're forced to leave. So my hope is this, the large format or big box retailers don't just adjust their business practices, but they apply the real pressure on Congress to stop this madness. So can you take that message back to DC and use that influence, because that's what it's going to take. I think it's going to take big business, Fortune 100 companies, it's going to take the large format BCOs to say enough is enough. So that's my question. Will you do that for us?
The short answer is yes. But I would, encourage you, as has been done, all politics is local. So for you guys, as was done with PMSA and IWU, collectively writing to your members here, talking about the real world impact this has on not only the industry here, but the economy at large, I think those messages need to continue. I think everybody needs to chime in and say, this is crazy, what's going on? You're talking about a core mission for Customs and Border Protection, which impacts the livelihood of the U.S. economy. That can't stop. We all know there are challenges with all the agencies as far as budget cuts they need to make. But you've got to look at the core mission and say, is this really where we want to make those cuts? And understand that that can't be done. You got to look elsewhere to make some of those cuts. So again, as much as we can take it back to DC and work with the members, all politics is local. So for you guys here to chime in and work with your state, local, and federal delegations and really measure what those impacts are and say, this is the real world impact it's having on us. Gates are shutting down. Here's the economic impact it's having on the port and all the industries associated with the port, and that's going to get the message out there and really get those members to say, we've got to stop the madness and really focus on what's at hand, what's really going on.
Thank you, John. If I could, I have another question, one for Erica. So Erica, I was, it was very interesting looking at the numbers and where the trade with your group is actually done. And what stood out is 2% of your members, or 2% of the business your members do is in Latin America. And that's pretty much in line with what I see the ports doing, which is unfortunate. Because if we look at emerging markets, I don't want to throw the pun out there, but Latin America, it's ripe for the picking. This is where we really need to be focusing a lot of our new business. And the way I see it, Latin America is closer to Long Beach than it is to Oakland. So I think there's a great opportunity for growth. Are your members looking more at Latin America or just still focusing on Asia and Europe?
I think right now they're focusing primarily on Asia and Europe, and we've heard that Latin America is the next gateway. We've heard that for a while, so we're kind of waiting to see it pick up with our members. But it also ties back to our commodity boards that do a lot of marketing overseas, promoting California products. So that's definitely something we can discuss with them to see if they are marketing to Latin America, because that's really the driving force with our members' products.
Thank you. I want to also thank all the panelists. You guys did a fantastic job today. Thank you for all your time today.
Okay, we have a question for Erica, another one. This person wants to know, what is the route for exports to Europe? Is that generally West Coast through Panama, or through the Suez, or overland, or how does that cargo get moved generally to Europe?
You know, okay, West Coast to Panama is traditionally what our members are using. Thank you, Jackie. That's my associate, so.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other questions? Ladies and gentlemen, you've been great. Thank you. We've got a lot of good information to get us going. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next year. Thanks.